Vegas. Leave one, not alone, cause we all one. Welcome to the arena.
Hey everyone, I'm so excited today. Welcome to the arena. We got a great show for you. This is my advice why you can still do that. Grab a notebook and a pen because tonight is a full education about money, your dollar, and how to keep it. I'm Cari Champion with my co-host Kyle Corver and special guest Killer Mike. Thank you so much for being here, my friend.
What's up? How y'all doing?
We're doing good. So listen, I think we talk about this often in a world where athletes and entertainers instantly become millionaires overnight.
Yeah.
We don't hear that other side of the story, guys, about how to invest your money, how to save your money, what happens when they lose their money, why did they lose their money. Financial literacy is a huge problem that most of us don't talk about. So, Killer Mike, I have to start with you. You have this docuseries. I recommend everyone watch it. It's on Netflix. It's called Trigger Warning.
Yeah.
You talk about the community, the lack of education, when it comes to the dollar. You also talk about how about spending in your own community and can you do it? I mean, there were so many great moments there. We'll get into that. But I know that you did that specifically based off your own experiences.
Yeah.
So what happened when you got your first room money, when you got that bag?
Well, first of all, Cari, just call me Michael, like Killer Mike. My mom
Killer Mike?
Like that.
Killer Mike just wants to be Mike, guys.
Just Mike, yeah. But I, first of all, I'm a fan of both you guys, so thank you guys for having me.
Oh, thank you.
Well, when I first music isn't like athletics. So, you know, with athletics, you work really, really hard. You know, if you're very, very fortunate, you're a small pool that gets scholarshipped into college, and then an even smaller pool that gets to play at a professional level in the NBA, right? So you do get a big payoff. The average NBA salary, I think, I was talking to an owner, was $8 million a year. So you can become a millionaire. With music, it's a little different in that there's just a far less chance, even, you know, that you can come up with a jingle that makes everybody want to get it. So it took me a longer time to get a lot of money. But I had friends that woke up to $900,000 checks that had never seen money before. And whether you get an $80,000 advance, which is what I believe I got, or a $900,000 check at first, unless you've been kind of grounded in how to use a dollar or a coin, you're going to make some mistakes of ego and arrogance, as a young man especially. So as a young man, of course, I went out and I bought a nicer version of an old school car. I didn't think about, you know, maybe you should ride that Honda out. Instead of putting down on my first property and getting a home, I rented a townhouse. So I just made those very simple mistakes, right? And I think that although I made them, I still had been raised in such a way I understood the power of a dollar. I saved money. I made sure that I put some money aside, and I would have started a business earlier, but I got distracted. What I did the second time around, though, when I got a second chance about 8, 9 years ago, is I immediately invested into a barbershop. I immediately invested in the real estate, and I married a woman that was just darn good with money. My wife, Shayna, is an intelligent woman. She grew up with her grandmother, ran a liquor house in the project, so she already knew about a coin, and she had a plan. She had a plan when I met her to how to retire by 50 years old. And I acclimated myself, much like my grandfather did to my grandmother, to my wife's plan. This is what we're going to put away. I had racked up some debt. I made sure I got my debt knocked out of the way, and we went forward. So I think that Tony Rexler, owner of Hawks, I have to give him credit as I talked to him and he's mentored me. He has a brilliant idea. We should be teaching financial literacy in high schow. And I like a lot of the subjects I learned in high school, but I haven't spoke a lick of French since I graduated, although being in Paris is fun. But I have definitely had to learn to use my dollar. And I think if we're teaching 14, 15, 16-year-olds that, I think we'll be better. And I got to tip my hat to a brother named Rendell Solomon. Rendell was from Chicago, from a sharecropping family. This brother is went from sharecropper to shareholder. He now gives stock to children and helps children understand stocks and bonds at an early age. And he left finance for this to be his plight toward the future. And I'm going to be happy to be partnering him with some stuff on the future, hopefully.
Okay, well, let me follow up with that, because there are people here watching thinking, well, look, I don't have money like Mike or Kyle. And if I'm paycheck to paycheck, how can I even start thinking about saving or financial literacy or investing? What would you say to them?
Okay, so it's a lot of times very arrogant to get a lot of money and then say, well, this is what you should do with money. So I'm always speaking from the standpoint of a guy who worked at AutoZone for $200 a week, sold cheap marijuana on the side, and tried to figure out saving his own life so the streets wouldn't take me under. So let me give you the advice that my grandparents gave me. Live within or below your means, Michael. If you can afford a $1,500 studio apartment, then you need to be figuring out how to find an $800 or $900 apartment. If you can afford to put down on a car and pay notes for 4 years, you can afford to save up for 2 years and buy a used car. Until this year, my wife and I only bought pre-owned cars. I bought her first new car this year, and that was after I got a huge payment. And when we got a huge payment, my wife took a lion's share of that payment, pivoted directly to our financial counselors and said, put this money up and we'll come back and visit in 10 years. We're going to live at and below our means. And I learned to do that by working at AutoZone. I lived in the apartment I can afford. I drove cars that I could fix myself or pay my uncles to help fix. And I did that. And a lot of people say that you can't do that, but you can. You can by doing things like what? Banking different. Well, how do I bank when I worked at AutoZone when I lost my bank account for a month? I had to go to check cashing places. I had to go to liquor stores. So to cash my $200 check, it would cost me $40, 20%. So when I got an opportunity to partner with something, say like a Greenwood, right? Greenwood is a banking platform that's coming to market in a few months. And with Greenwood, if I'd had Greenwood at that time, my check would have came straight to my bank account. It would have gone straight on my card, and I could have used my card and not had a check cashing place rip me off for $40. So that's a way that I'm trying to contribute back to that kid that's out there working at AutoZone now, or working at O'Reilly's, or trying his best to raise a family, to simply say, if you get control over that $40, that now allows you to save, and that 45 times becomes 200 bucks. That 200 bucks becomes a pair of Nikes you buy and you resell for 280 bucks. That 280 bucks becomes an investment in a shoe cleaning service that you have in the mall. But it's going to be hard. It's going to be making some, and not hard like incredibly difficult to do. It's hard to resist the temptation to buy things that make you feel good. And you have to just simply resist the temptation and really, really wait and be focused and disciplined, much like an athlete on and off the court. And if you can discipline your mind to do that, I promise you that although you may not have a Taj Mahal in 20 years, you will have a piece of land or ownership or something to leave to your family, and you can see yourself as a cornerstone in the legacy of wealth building versus just a victim of others that have done it.
Yeah, so Kyle's over here saying,
I got to talk now?
It's a, Kyle's like, it's a full amen sermon in here, but I want to follow up on something you said, and then I'll pass the mic to you, Kyle. You said that's why you have Greenwood. Folks may not know what Greenwood Bank is. It's a digital bank that you created with Ryan Glover, from my understanding, and I believe Ambassador
and Ambassador Andrew Young.
Yes. So tell people what that is, but what you're talking about, and I focus on that, as a mindset.
Yeah.
You're saying don't have that pleasure right away, and that's hard to change that mindset.
It really is. Like, I really wanted a piece of chocolate cake this morning. You know? And congratulating myself on losing a couple pounds. I'm a holdout to maybe my birthday, you know? My grandfather was born and his father abandoned him, and he worked in a sawmill from the time he was 10 years old to support his 2 sisters and his mother. My grandmother's father's father was used in the Tuskegee experiment. They were sharecroppers early, and my grandmother got an opportunity because her parents were willing to sacrifice and sharecrop and work the fields themselves. They got an opportunity to go to school. Because my grandmother went to school, she became a nurse. She came to Atlanta, Georgia. She let all her brothers and sisters live with her as they completed school. And that sharecroppers who bought land, who were my great-grandparents, that land provided opportunity for my grandmother to be educated. That education gave her an opportunity to buy a house and have place of refuge for her sisters and brothers while they got education. So my great-grandparents are the cornerstone to wealth in my family. We're not wealthy, we're not rich, but my wife helped me understand you and your sisters were far fortunate because I grew up in the housing projects. And my grandmother worked her entire life simply to buy a small A-frame house that you and your sisters grew up in by proxy of your grandparents, great-grandparents having set up a foundation for your grandparents. So what I understand about the mind state is everything I'm working for today has little or nothing to do with me, because I've gotten all the G.I. Joe toys I ever wanted. I bought every muscle car I ever thought I wanted. I got a big gold chain. That's what I wanted at 12 years old. So I feel those 12-year-old dreams. But now every move I make is to ensure that my children's children one day will not have to do this type of suffering. They're going to have their own challenges, but I don't want where am I going to have my next meal. I don't want how do I finance my first idea to be something that's insurmountable to them. I want that to be something that's well within reach, because my great-grandparents who sharecropped until they bought those 25 acres in Tuskegee, Alabama that we still own, they understood that we're the cornerstone to where our great-grandparents would be. And I knew those people. You know, until I was 10 years old, my great-grandmother died. She taught me how to sew a button on a shirt. She taught her mother, who was enslaved, to read. She also assisted me in reading. So her legacy beyond finance is one of teaching, one of learned and passing on that learning. And I think that if we start to see ourselves that way, it'll give us the discipline to say, I'm gonna hold on and wait a little while longer before I spend this coin.
Yeah, wow. Speaking of discipline, mindset, so Kyle, talk to me when you got your first big check. What'd you spend it on? I mean, I don't even know. What could it be?
I bought a 50-inch flat screen TV.
Balling.
And thought it was the best DVD player. And I think I bought it at Best Buy, and for so many dollars back then, you got so much money back, and I got like 20 DVDs. And I was set.
That's it?
That was it. I made a lot of mistakes as well. You know, I think, you know, when I think my rookie deal, I was a second-round pick. I had like $400,000 contract, and half of it goes to taxes, which we talked about earlier. You don't think about taxes all the time. And I was just like, I don't know if I have enough money to invest. But so I made a whole bunch of bad decisions as well. I just kind of bought what I felt like I needed. I didn't buy anything that had like lasting value. Yeah. And so I think you make that mistake the first time, comes around the second time, you try to do a little bit better. I think in the NBA, I think guys are doing better. I think we've learned from generations before us who kind of had to, you know, learn the hard way with some of this.
And they're making so much money now.
Yeah, they are. But yeah, they are. We are. And what are we doing with it? And I think guys are being intentional. I think the NBA's done a great job. We've seen some of the harder stories that have come out, and they're doing a great job of trying to teach guys to find good people to partner with. You know, we don't know a lot of these things, so you got to find the right people to partner with, and I think that's been a lot of the work that the NBA has done for us.
One of the things that I'm curious about is how, you said the NBA has done that for you, but how important is it, or how much do you guys discuss, you know, financial literacy in the league? Does the union do that? Are you taught to be aware of certain people who are trying to obviously capitalize off of the money that you have?
Yeah. The NBA is trying to do that. The NBPA is trying to do that. Teams are trying to do that. You talked about Tony Russell with the Hawks. I know he's really passionate about this.
Very.
These are conversations that are happening, but I think the big part is players are seeing what they can build, the brands that they can build. And I think that's more than just what are we doing right now, what can I buy with this money right now, but what can I build for the future, for my communities. These are brand new conversations that are happening, and I think guys are trying to embrace it.
I love it. Kyle Korver, Mike, not Killer Mike, just Mike, my guy. Coming up after the break, Senator Cory Booker will join us. We have a lot to talk about. Reparations, we're gonna talk about a couple of bills that you're introducing. Senator Booker will join us here on The Arena. We appreciate you guys sticking around. We'll be back in just a few moments. Welcome back to The Arena. There is some ball to be played tonight, 7:30 Eastern. Raptors at Bucks. Look at Pascal Siakam. Good player. How do you feel about him, Kyle?
Great player.
Great player.
Off the guard.
Yeah, humble guy too. I like it. Coming up on TNT at 7:30 Eastern. Meanwhile, back to The Arena. Recent studies by Columbia University and Morningstar have found that the baby bonds concept would significantly close the racial wealth gap among young adults in America. Joining us now is one of the lawmakers who recently introduced this bill. That's Senator Cory Booker. We appreciate you being here on The Arena, Senator. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to be with you.
Okay, so first off, explain this bill to me. How does it work, and what is the feasibility of it becoming law?
Well, it is this idea that in America, we use our tax code to help people with wealth create more wealth. $600 billion every year we give as tax expenditures, incentives to people with wealth to do things like, you know, buy homes, do other things. But we don't do it for Americans to get wealth who don't have it. And so this bill is a simple declaration. The richest country in the world, paychecks help you get by, but wealth helps you get ahead. Let's make as American birthright every child born $1,000 in an interest-bearing account. And then every year of the child's life up to 18, they get more money deposited into that account based upon the wealth of their parents. And so the poorest kids, 1 out of every 5 or 6 kids in America is below the poverty line. They would get the full $2,000. and it would graduate out. Wealthiest kids would get zero. And then by the time you're 18, that would mean the lowest income children in America would have upwards of $50,000 in an account to use for things that we know build generational wealth. That means going to college, it means buying a home, starting a business. It would add significantly to the overall economy. And as you said, very importantly, in a nation where the average African American has 1/10 of the wealth of the average white American, it would actually virtually close the racial wealth gap as well. It is a bill that is an idea that's been from both sides of the political aisle, this idea that in a capitalist nation, we should help everybody have a solid nest egg to begin their adult life. And it wouldn't cost that much. It would be about 1/10 of all of that wealth transfer we already do through the tax code up. Let's make sure that we create investments for every American.
So from my understanding, and I want to make sure I understand this clearly, you're saying this money comes from the federal government, or how, in fact, does this money actually get placed on for these children? And what are the qualifications? How do you determine who is, according to you, those in poverty that will actually be able to get the money?
So we already do that analysis in the federal government already for things like the earned income tax credit. So we know we have a refundable tax credit that we could create where the government initially, for every child in America, gets that interest-bearing account. So every child has a nest egg. And by the way, social science research has shown that a child up even just a small account knowing it's there increases their likelihood to go to college by 3 to 4 times. And so then the placing of money in there is easy to analyze. We already do that by income-eligible programs all throughout the country, including the stimulus checks that we're talking about giving out that would start to phase out around $75,000 a year. So it's something we have the capacity to do, we already do, but let's start doing it for Americans to help every American build wealth in this nation. And by the way, it would increase the overall economic strength of our entire country.
Senator Booker, this is Kyle Korver. Thanks for being on the show. You are coming up with lots of bills. You introduced one in December around college sports and athletes being able to profit off their names and their likeness. Can you explain what that bill is and what you see that doing? And ultimately, my last question is, what do you think that does to college sports?
Yeah, sure. No, thank you for that. And by the way, the baby bonds legislation is getting a lot of traction. We now have 17 co-sponsors in the Senate, including the Senate Majority Leader. But look, I played Division I ball out at Stanford. And even then, I was seeing what I consider the exploitation of athletes, where you have college players. Remember the Shabazz Napier who said, wins the NCAA Final Four, wins the championship, and then talks about not being able to afford food. Because if you're a college athlete, you're not working, while you're working 60, 70 hours a week on your sport. If you come from a low-income environment, you are put in a situation where you can't even afford to get your parents to fly out and see you play. They're selling jerseys with your name on it for more money than if your parents are working minimum wage and they make an entire day of work. So they're profiting to the tune of the NCAA is about a $15 billion industry. And the people through their artistry and athleticism who are creating this wealth get absolutely no part of that. And then on top of that, they get no guarantee of real access to a degree. If, as a lot of my teammates, people I played with, have knee injuries, spine injuries, you name it, they're pulling money out of their own pocket over their lifetime to pay for those medical costs. The university won't even cover that. So I introduced an athlete's bill of rights that includes a lot of things to protect their well-being, their health, their safety, stop the exploitation of athletes, and lets them share in the wealth that they are creating. Remember, right now we have an industry where the highest paid government employee in most states is the football or basketball coach. While a lot of the people in their peak earning years are not getting paid, they don't make it into the pros, and now they find themselves covering the cost of medical industries, trying to finish their degree, as well as missed out on a lot of income they could have gotten if they had more power and control over their name, image, and likeness.
It's an honor to always be with you. We've been in a lot of rooms together. You know I'm a huge fan of the work you do. I want to first just tip my hat to the late John Conyers, as he wanted H.R. 40, a study into what reparations should be. I want to tip my hat to the Angela Project that's talked about what reparations should be, considering we've been here since 1619. And I know there are a lot of people working on the front, some that you may or may not agree with. That's from Antonio Moore to Yvette Carnell to my brother Tariq with Foundational Black Americans, ADOS. And also in COBRA, which is one of the grandfather and mother organizations talking about reparations. In matters of reparations, I think that at this point, whether it's redlining or Jim Crowism, which is a cute way to say apartheid, or over 250 years of free labor, I think it's due, I think it's owed. I'm glad that you attach that it will help the bigger community. I'd like to ask, though, away from public sector of reparations, what do you think about Robert Smith, the brother who paid all the Morehouse graduates, I think a year or two ago, wiped out their debt? His 2% plan to make sure that corporate America, who black people in the black community, even the muck and the mire of Jim Crow, have made many companies, billions, many companies even stocked and traded right there off slaves and have built into these mega billion and trillion dollars. What do you think about his 2% plan, saying 2% of that corporation money should come back specifically to black America to empower our community so that we may not only continue to empower these Fortune 500 companies, but build some of our own?
So, Mike, first of all, you are artists in the tradition, the best of American Black tradition that understands that your platform has to be used to fight for justice. And everything you're talking about, these are not issues, black community versus white communities. These are issues about justice. And injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Absolutely.
And we know that if the black-white wealth gap was closed in this country, to the overall economy, this is McKinsey's study, would add $1.5 trillion. And that's why I am proud to be the Senate sponsor of H.R. 40. And so Robert Smith is a friend. He is a guy that's thinking all the time about how to create wealth in African-American communities. I apologize, I'm not familiar with his 2% plan, but I do know this. There is measurable exploitation that has been done through laws that have prevented the growth of African-American wealth, literally specifically written into laws up until the 1970s. And so I'm sitting here as the only senator that lives in an inner city, majority black community where we don't mistake wealth with worth here. But I can show you how the reality and the injustices that we live in have been fueled by corporate decisions that undermine the opportunities in this community, as well as government decisions that have done the same thing. We have to consciously atone for the harms that were done, from everything from redlining and mortgage payments, mortgage policies that stop the accumulation of African-American wealth, to even things we take for granted, like Social Security, where occupations that blacks were overrepresented in, agriculture and domestic workers, were written out of those laws and excluded simply because a lot of the white supremacist senators did not want blacks to benefit from those programs. So we need to start speaking to this history and understanding this is not about black people over white people. This is about how do we as a country heal and grow in wealth for everyone. Because right now it is shameful that not only is there a black-white wealth differential, but in your lifetime and mine, Mike, I think I'm a little older than you, but in the span of the last 50 years, the gains that we were closing that gap up to the 1960s. But since the kind of era in the 1980s of mass incarceration, outsourcing, corporate concentration, all of these things have led to the narrowing, the expanding of the black-white wealth gap. And if we don't address this in our country, we will all be hurting economically as a result.
Senator, someone is watching right now, and you mentioned reparations. It's been talked about, as Mike said, overdue, long due, should get it. Quite simply, when are we getting our money?
Well, see, again, I worry. No, you listen. The heart of the three people on this, I just love you. I wish we were literally sitting in person,
yeah,
so we could hang out and talk.
Yeah.
I live in a world where I see people react to even just a word reparation because they envision it that my family's got to write a check and give it to your family, and they're playing into a lot of the hype around this that I believe is missing the point. You know, Mike, you talked about 250 years of creating extraordinary wealth on the backs of that pernicious institution of slavery, followed by the longest period of terrorism within our own country that lasted until through the early 1900s, 1920, 1930, 1940, people still being lynched at alarming rates. Black farmers in 1920 losing billions and billions of dollars of generational wealth, with blacks virtually being swindled out of their land. I could go through all of the measurable economic harms heaped upon African American communities that not only had an economic impact, but a generational trauma as a result of what's going on. Not to mention, we still live in a nation where, just to look at the lead, I mean, Flint, Michigan, people know that and the lead problems they had, but there are 3,000 jurisdictions where children have more than twice the blood lead levels of Flint, Michigan. It would cost about $20 billion as a country for us just to get rid of the lead service pipes, but we are choosing not to do things that not only hurt and harm disproportionately African Americans, but also cost us money as a nation, losing out on that genius. So I just want to say there, and I know we have to wind down, but there is an urgency to deal with these issues that are undermining the success of African Americans in particular, but the nation as a whole. And we need to start talking about it in a way that can draw more allies into this fight, because right now I'm seeing far too little progress to make up for these harms and these wounds that are hurting the American soul.
Yeah, I see what you're saying here, Senator. You're saying people are just pushing back even at the thought of it, but I appreciate you trying to break it down so that we can all make it digestible for us. Senator Booker, you're welcome to come in studio next time we're here. It's been such a pleasure. Yes. We appreciate the work that you're doing. Continue the good fight. And if you want to, just turn on the arena, because we're coming back in just a few moments. We got some great TV to talk about. Okay, we'll see you in a few moments. Thank you, Senator. The Arena with Mike, Kyle Korver, and Cari Champion will return, guys.
Out of it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Arena. We are saying this in the commercial break as well. We agree with you. Loving Killer Mike speaking about living at or below your means on the Arena right now. This kind of money, smart money strategy needs to be shared in mass. It has been an education. I told you guys to grab your pen and your pad. Killer Mike, also known as just Simple Mike. Thank you for being here and sharing it with everyone, sharing that knowledge. Kyle Korver, it's always a pleasure. You're a good buddy and a good co-pilot. Coming up next, we got the guys. It's the CarMax pre-show. Charles, Kenny, Shaq, they're all next. Talking about good things. EJ too.